Abolitionism, the act of abolition or trying to get rid of something, often referred to as the riddance of African American slavery.
To be a slave, to be owned by another person as a car, house, or table is owned. To live as a piece of property that could be sold, a child sold from its mother, a wife from her husband. To be considered not human, but a thing that plowed the fields, cut the wood, cooked the food, nursed another's child, a thing whose sole function was determined by the one who owned you.
Slaves had to face many hardships. They had to pick cotton from sunrise to sunset, causing their hands to bleed painfully. And then they might also have the nightly task of sewing or knitting, as well as taking care of their families.
Then they were forced to sleep on straw beds or dirt floors.
If the masters didn't like the work the slaves completed, they would whip or punish them.
Their work, housing, and living conditions were terrible, but they could not disagree or act against their masters because of their forced enslavement.
Thus, the abolitionism movement was born.
The abolitionist movement was a monumental step towards getting rid of slavery. It was started by many very opinionated people who believed slavery to be unjust and wanted immediate emancipation, or slaves everywhere to be freed immediately from their bondage.
It went against God's commandments or expectations of society.
Frederick Douglass, Abraham Lincoln, Harriet Tubman, and John Brown, just some of the famous abolitionists that joined together to fight against slavery. Blacks and whites came together to fight for a noble cause.
But little did they know that this fight would not be easy and would question the stability of our new nation. Blood would be shed, and even the war would not solve this issue. It would take time and acceptance to determine equality amongst men, black and white. From 1861 to 1865, the Civil War was fought.
The war did not completely begin as a fight for freedom. Tension between the North and the South had been growing for decades. And slavery and states' rights became troubling issues after the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860.
The South did not want to be controlled by the Union because they were telling them that slavery was unacceptable, and the South was determined not to change their ways or lose their main source of labor for their massive plantations. They did not want to be controlled by the government either. Then they formed the Confederate States of America in January of 1861.
During the first few years, the South saw much victory in their favor, but their good fortune then turned to loss at Gettysburg and Vicksburg in 1863. From these battles on, Northern forces worked hard to conquer the South, and the South was forced to surrender in April of 1865.
After the war, slavery was abolished by the Emancipation Proclamation, but the issue would not be solved overnight. Segregation laws were soon established after the war that prohibited blacks from having equal rights.
We didn't give up, and we would eventually have civil rights and be treated fairly no matter our color. Slavery would be abolished, and abolitionism would in turn affect the United States forever.